Thank you for coming. I'm glad to be here. I'm always excited to be able to talk about games, to talk about careers. I've had a kind of a windy career path myself, so maybe there are some of you out there who aren't sure what you want to do, or you're going to wind your way towards something. And I'm an example of it can be done. You'll make it. um, have you? Are you all seeing the screen?
Yes,
Okay.
we can see it.
Let's see if I can. Whoa. All right. So my story, gosh, I went to Newport Harbor High back in the late 80s. And at that time, I was pretty focused on military service. I wanted to be a fighter pilot. I thought that would be amazing to go fly fighter jets. There are all these romantic visions of what that would be like. And so much so that I really wanted to go to the Air Force Academy or maybe the Naval Academy, primarily, USAFA. And to do that, I thought it would be clever to go to a military school to kind of learn the ways and see if that would give me an advantage. So I left Newport Harbor for New Mexico Military Institute, right way out in Roswell, New Mexico. The UFO crashed. And I did the last 2 years of high school there. And I enjoyed being a cadet quite a bit. So I stayed for the junior college. Did a lot of ROTC training. But the funny thing is that by the time the academy rejected me, my vision, not quite perfect, I didn't really want to go anyway. I had learned by being a cadet, by living in that environment, by being around people who were prior service, that I was not necessarily built that way. And the things that I wanted to do day to day, moment to moment, really didn't fit with what the romantic vision of that life was. And I have huge respect for people who do it, which is part of why I was okay stepping back, because I started to realize that my vision of what I wanted was really naive. And the things that were required of people who do that was very different, like I said, than the way I'm built. And so it felt respectful for me to step away, and also, respectful of myself. Like, probably could have survived that career. And gosh, if I'd have gone in there, I'd be retiring now. All my friends are retiring. But anyway, so I went to military school and I met some fantastic people there. I met, professor of Old English. So I got to learn a little bit of Old English, the language of Beowulf, for those of you who are in probably freshman English. Got to work with an artist who he taught art at a military school, and people would ask him, "What are you doing here?" And he would say, "Well, a preacher's got to go where the sinners are." I thought was kind of funny, but he did sort of save my soul. Doing art in the basement of that building really kind of soothed me out in some stressful times. Anyway, I won't go on this long for every slide. So I went to a military school, then I came out, went to UCLA to study English. So studied English literature. Thought I wanted to be a writer, maybe a screenwriter. And I got out, and then here's where following your interests takes you. Anybody ever heard of Morpheus International? Probably not. You guys know the artist H.R. Giger? He designed the Alien. Wow. Well, he was huge in the 80s, and I was a fanboy. So I contacted this. I used to buy things from this gallery. They published his stuff in the United States. And I drove up there once to pick up some posters and saw the tiny office and just offered to help. Said, "Hey, I speak some German. I'd be happy to lend a hand wherever." And so the summer after I graduated from UCLA, I ended up working at Morpheus. And that led to 3 years. I was eventually the production manager of a little fine art publisher house. I learned a ton. Story for another day, but got to take Giger to Disneyland, which was really surreal. But I was working with all these artists and I was feeling a little bit unfulfilled. Job was stressful. There was it had perks, but long hours, very small company. And some of these artists encouraged me to follow my dreams. And so I went back to school. I went to Art Center, and I didn't need a degree, but their program ends in a degree. So I ended up doing an illustration degree. So I actually have 2 bachelor's degrees, which is kind of wasteful. But does come in, I'm equipped with a lot of different skills from that. So I studied illustration at Art Center. I got out and I started working freelance, did a lot of little jobs, was teaching at the Art Institute, which I think is now dead. And then I got a job in the game industry. And I'll talk a little bit about that. You can intern to get in. There's a big convention that you can volunteer to work at for price of admission. And I went there and I networked, right? So just um, talking to people in lines for talks, the seminars, talking to people within the workshops that were there, just talking to people randomly when you're standing around. I ended up meeting a bunch of people. I got a number of offers and ended up working at Heavy Iron Studios, then at Insomniac, and then Backflip Studios, which any of you play Dragon Veil or did play Dragon Veil? So yeah, we made Dragon Veil there. And then I was a little bit done with the industry for a while. I wanted a little bit of a break. So I went back to school again. Laguna College of Art and Design has a program for game design. So they have an undergraduate program. You can go to college there and take game art, and it's a crackerjack program. And then there's a grad school where they teach, a little bit of programming, game design, narrative, production techniques, kind of everything but the art for making games. So I did that, and then I was working at a company called Broken Circle as a producer. So I morphed from a book publisher to a freelance artist, teacher, to a 3D artist. I started with environment work. I've moved into character and prop work, a little bit of visual effects and some concept. Backflip on mobile, I did a lot of concept work, and became a team lead and started to wear more hats in that direction. And then my latest job, that's basically what I've done, is business development and production. So kind of running the production or making the schedules and keeping things on track. So this is not my earliest game art, but these pieces were the first pieces I did as a test to get on the character team at Insomniac. So at the time I was there, the environment team and the character team were like separate, and they were sort of rivals. And the character team, well, I'll explain a little bit about the technical requirements of game art, but let's just say that the character team had more to work with than the environment team. Environment team's got to build the whole world. Character team just has to build one person or one prop. And so sometimes they get as many resources for that prop as an environment artist might get to build a town. So, it's challenging to be an environment artist. It's challenging both ways, but anyway. So I did this weapon as a test because they, character team wanted to know if I could do that work. And they accepted me, and I went on to make, this was an upgrade. I don't know if you guys have played the Ratchet and Clank games, but the weapons in there are a big deal. Well, I shouldn't say a big deal. There are a lot of weapons. That's kind of an Insomniac thing, is lots of crazy weapons, lots of ways to blow things up. So this is the regular weapon and its upgrade. This one was a couple of games later. This I got to help design. So let's go back for a sec. On these things, part of what landed me on the character team and part of what made me get stuck making lots of weapons was attention to detail. So I was stressed out as an environment artist because building a whole town with a small number of assets doesn't come naturally to me. I want to make every building individual. I want every bench to have personality. You don't have that luxury as an environment artist. So you have to find ways to make it feel unique, but you also have to develop a good instinct for, what the players are going to pay attention to and what they're not, kind of where to invest detail. Whereas, I'm fascinated with how this thing might actually work. Like, what's the little pod sticking off the front? What are those bands inside? So in my head, I just want to answer those questions. I also want the hinges to work right. I want the triggers to pull right. I want, if it's a device that has to transform, I want it to actually be able to transform. So that kind of detail got me into making character art, primarily, again, weapon stuff. Most of it was concepted already. Somebody had made the art. with the, the two-dimensional art, the design, and I realized it in 3D. On this one, this was a whole set of weapons that were made out of multiple pieces that you could reconfigure, and I think there were 27 different possible configurations. So I was basically building 3 weapons worth of parts, and then it gave the game 27 weapons. It was a really complicated thing, and I ended up working with the programmer on how to colorize it, and working with the designers on, they knew they had some ideas for what they wanted, but they let me kind of run with it too. So I got to help design the thing, functionally as well as artistically. So these little roughs on the right were a version of the pistol that, like I said, I just kind of ran with it. Like, I was showing them how the whole system might work together. And these are really rough, so that they got done quickly, but they were helpful. The final designs that the concept artist did were kind of right over these designs. One thing that I did was that the configuration was all correct. So in a game, the character like Ratchet, he only has like one animation for holding a pistol. It's not specific to each pistol. He only has one animation for holding, like, which is a ridiculous animation. His hands are like this, like I don't know what anybody holds that's like that, but that's how he holds his weapons. So there's a pose that the character's in, and then they just swap the different weapons in. So if the handles aren't in the right place, it doesn't work. And one of the things that I did was kind of look out for details like that, because sometimes the concept artist, even though they had a template to trace for where the handle should be, would move them because it looked better, and then I would have to move them back, and then there would be discussions. So communication is important if you're going to observe details and correct them. Courage and candor, being able to, say something before it's a problem. Like, I didn't want to have the argument when things were in the wrong place. But if I just build what they gave me, which is what some people would do, then when it went in game, it would be broken, and then the thing would come up, but they were pushing the discussion down the road. Somebody else would have the discussion. So I started to speak up when I saw that, even for other people, and that's kind of how I became a team lead. Yeah, so this is one of these crazy Ratchet shotguns. I'm talking a little bit more about, I guess I just kind of dove right into game art, 3D art. How many of you make 3D art? Can I see how many people are artists or want to be game artists? Okay, all right. We'll talk about some of the other paths as well. Yeah, we'll talk about some of the other paths in a moment. But all those little white lines on there divide the model up into vertices, edges, and faces, right? So each point where 2 or more lines meet is called a vertex. And you only get so many of those on a model. And those really define the model. They're little infinitely tiny mathematical points in space. And they store, what their position is relative to each other. They can store color information. They can store animation information, the weighting. Like, let's say you have an arm and you have points here. They're weighted 100% here, maybe to this joint, so that when I move it, they all move exactly with the joint. But stuff in here kind of is partly weighted to this joint and partly weighted to this joint, so that they kind of squirm. Anyway, holds that information, and then it holds information that translates to a map called the UV coordinates, the UV map, which is how you paint a flat texture and wrap it around a 3D model. Is you kind of unwrap the model and arrange it in 2D space, and paint it. There are faster ways to do it now than there were when I made this stuff. But anyway, and this is an example of a map. So this is a color map, even though it's grayscale, for this. So all those little pieces I had to unwrap, cut up, and arrange on a sheet. And so every single one of those pieces is accounted for here, all wrapped up. You can be efficient by mapping things so that, some of those little circle forms, like the ends of drums and things like that, if you make one that looks good, you can use it on most of them. In the old days, we'd use it on all of them, But now, we have a lot more space. The reason this color map is gray is because the whole weapon was customizable, including the color. So one of the things that I did was work with a programmer to design a shader, which is a little program that tells the computer how to read all this information and paint it on your screen. A shader that would take this painting, wrap it around the model, but also tint it with color. So it's pretty cool. This is what we call a normal map. And the normal map, each one of those colors represents a different direction. So if you look back at those flat surfaces, right, each one of those triangles is a flat triangle, and it has a normal. Now the normal is a little vector that comes off the surface. So it's perpendicular to the surface. And when the game engine is reading that model and trying to put light on it so it can paint it on your screen, it knows the normal direction. And if the whole plane is flat, then it lights it all the same, right? Just like if you had a card out in the sun, it would all catch light at the same time. But what a normal map does is it fakes it. It tells the computer, hey, I know you're only tracking this one plane. It's pretty cheap to track one plane. But when you start painting it, when you get to this color, pretend like the surface is going that way and pretend like the surface. So you get like surface detail without having to pay for geometry. And I hope I'm not getting too technical here. Basically, I wanted to show this stuff because this is what 3D game art is. Like, this is what it's about. This is the end product. So it's not all fun and games. It can be tedious. It can be technical, but it's really rewarding when you put all this stuff together and then you see it in game with light on it and it feels real, or it feels really, fantastic and silly, if that's what it's supposed to feel like. This map is the map of how shiny different parts are. So you can get different textures in there. You can put scratches in it. Mostly we try and call out the edges or different materials. And then this one maps all the lights. So it tells the game, hey, make that stuff glow. This one is not a normal map, or not a map that you see often. This was the mask that told the program that programmer wrote which areas of the model to tint which color. So the player had like a primary color, a secondary color, a trim color, and a light color. So all of those are different colors on here. So it was just one extra map that the game had to read to make that thing work. I am not working on Rift Apart. I'm no longer at Insomniac. That was a lot of fun working on the Ratchet games. The Resistance games were sandwiched in between them, and those are kind of depressing to work on. It was really weird to go from like bright, bouncy, happy Ratchet and Clank to gray, Doom Resistance. Anybody play Resistance? I don't even know if they're working on current gen consoles. How would you store information about different materials? Seems you're tough. That's a good question. Somebody wants to know, how do you store information about different materials? For example, if it's thin or tough. So in video games, nothing really exists. You get nothing for free. Like if you're shooting a film, you go outside, you go to a nice location, you could have light, you could have a background, all that stuff is for free because it's just already there. In a game, you have to make it all, you have to program it all. And so things like materials depends on the game engine. It depends on the specific solution that somebody has programmed. So if you want to have destructibles, you want to be able to break a chair or something, there are different ways to do it. Usually the big answer would be you tag it. So you tag materials with different properties to get them to do different things. We're here about the new Spider-Man game. I was gone long before Spider-Man, but yeah, it's a pretty incredible game. It was the final straw where they couldn't resist being purchased by Sony anymore, because they used to be independent. They stayed independent for a long time, like 25 years, which is kind of unheard of. And I think it was a really good payday for everybody who was there when Spider-Man came out and then Sony bought them. This is a human character that I made with a really filthy t-shirt for Resistance. And The model's pretty dated now. I'm pretty proud of the sculpting on it. Like those arms, I'm pretty proud of. The texture work though, the surfacing is kind of outdated. There's better ways to do that stuff now. And it doesn't have his hair on there. There's more stuff for resistance. Got to make a kid. That was kind of fun. And then Dragonvale. So I left Insomniac, wanted to go work at a startup. I'd never been at a small company. So I was the 11th person at Backflip, and kind of the first of a wave of game pros that came in to help them, as they were doing paper toss. They had great sales in the mobile space, and mobile was really young at that time. So the apps that were doing well were really primitive. So we came in and we were part of the wave of like kicking up the art and things like that. And on this one, I got to wear a lot of hats. I got to design things. I got to write story. I got to be a lore keeper. I got to make concept art and lead that team. So these were the first 7 dragons that were designed, and some of them are pretty wonky looking to me now. The red one was actually the art director's drawing, and I cleaned it up for him. But you'll notice like it's the only one that has little pointy fingers instead of actual claws. And this was the process for concept art. It started life as a dinosaur game instead of a dragon game. And so I was trying to figure out like, what do we want these to look like? So there were pages and pages and pages of drawings of different styles. Like, are they cartoony like this? Are they a little more realistic? Do they feel more like flat cutouts? Just like really went crazy with exploring different ideas. And then we came up with, we like this proportion set. And so it's like, all right, how will we color them? How do we render them? And we went with something a bit different. But for those of you who are game artists, or for those of you who are thinking about it, but maybe are intimidated by the idea of making art, like you can be pretty scribbly and you don't need software. I did most of this stuff on printer paper with a blue pencil. And some of these drawings are really scribbly and fast. But you can see they evolved. So if you look at the little guy in the lower, like the bottom, right? And then the guy in the bottom here is kind of a version of him. And then there's one that's a little more cleaned up, but still not quite, ready for the public. And then that's the cleaned up one that got inked, although his legs are longer than they ended up being in the game. So iteration is important. Being able to take an idea like a sketch, come up with a lot of sketches, find what you like, and make it a little better, and then make it a little better, and then make it a little better, is the way to go. So if you don't just, like, very few people just put their pencil down and out comes a masterpiece. Most of us have to iterate to get there. And I think there's a lot in life like that, where put your best foot forward, get it done. And I've heard, you guys know the writer Neil Gaiman? Wrote Coraline and some other things, lots of things. Anyway, he says, you can't edit what you haven't written. So that's his advice to young writers, is just start writing, because even if it's terrible, you can look at it and go, oh man, that's terrible, and then rewrite it. Yeah, low res dragon. So concept art, I was just kind of talking about this. How many of you know the name Ian McCaig? McCaig is a concept artist. He worked on all the Star Wars prequels. Now that guy, when he puts his pencil to paper, it pretty much is a masterpiece. He's amazing. I wrote a book called Shadowline that's kind of about his process, his imaginative exercises to kind of build the muscles for being a concept artist. And in short, his advice is, no matter how much time you have to make a piece of art or like design something, take 1/3 of that and just do ideas, just scribbly ideas. They don't have to be pretty. They just get the idea down, and don't edit. Don't say no to anything. Don't go, well, I don't know. Don't think about it. Just do it. If your subconscious puts it out there, just get it on paper and move on to the next one. Say yes to everything. Then you sit back, you pick the ones you like, or the parts of different ones that you like, and you do research. You go look up. So his example was like Jabba the Hutt. So he says, it's kind of a slug and a frog, and he's got cat eyes. So in the research phase, ideally you would get an actual slug and be looking at the actual slug with your own eyes while you were painting the slug. And the idea is to feed reality into your head. And this is not just for art. This is all creative things. Like you feed the creative material or the real material into your head. And then you come back with the final third. Maybe that third's a little longer, and you fuse the two together. Um, but someone like McCaig, who's been doing this for decades, and at the level of working for ILM, every time he starts a project, he does a bunch of studies. He fills his brain with the rules of drawing again because they fade. Even a guy like McCaig. So, you know, keeping up. Anyway, this is kind of an idea of like from scribbly sketch in the upper right to what went into the game to kind of me looking at original art and animals and making a poster for the Denver Comic Con. That was just kind of fun. So if you want to be a game artist, required skills, foundation skills. Do not go racing for software. Go pick up a pencil and some printer paper and start drawing. Just draw shapes. If you can start, there are figure drawing workshops, there are costumes figure drawing workshops, there are a lot of online resources. But drawing, Viscom drawing is a little bit different. It's a little more like plan drawing. Anybody can make that drawing. My brother would say, I can't do art. I'm not an artist. And then we were building a set of shelves, and he does this kind of perfect little architectural plan drawing of the shelves. I was like, that's drawing. Communicated perfectly what we needed to do. We did our shopping list and built the things based on his drawing. So design, meaning things like the theories of design, line, form, shape, value, the elements of design. Color theory, kind of understanding how colors work together. And if you want to be a character artist of any kind or a creature artist, knowing anatomy, surface anatomy is important, like knowing how things fit together so that what you design can be informed by reality is important. Digital skills, if you want to get into that eventually, if you want to paint, Photoshop is good. There are a bunch of digital paint programs now. ZBrush, Mudbox, and Blender all have like digital sculpting tools. Maya, 3D Studio Max, and Blender also have polygon modeling. So digital sculpting is where there's so many polygons you can't possibly move each little point at a time. You just have to kind of use a brush to pull hundreds of them at once. And it's more like digital clay. Polygon modeling is you could literally move every vertex on the model to get the shape you want. For game engines, now this is something I'll come back to later. If you're interested in doing this stuff, start doing it now. Unity is free. If you just want to download Unity and play with Unity, and they have all kinds of tutorials for how to get started. They have sample projects you can pull down. And so it's basically like a puzzle in a box. You download it, they give you all the materials for it, and they walk you through how to write the scripts and do all that. You will learn a ton. One of the main things you will learn is like me going to military school because I thought I wanted to be a military person, was that I did not want to be a military person. So you may learn by doing that like, man, I'd rather just play games and do something else for a living. On the other hand, you may get totally fascinated. You may decide that you love coding, that writing some little lines of code and then seeing things happen based on that, maybe that's more exciting to you than you thought it would be. Anyway, so I would highly recommend that. Unreal, also an amazing game engine, free. If you want to just pull it down and play with it, it's free. Scripting, if you get an opportunity to learn a little scripting, I think no matter what you want to do in the future, it's probably a good idea. Oh, sorry, somebody asked, what is something I wished I knew when I was younger? Well, it's a long list. We don't have time. I think it's that idea of iteration. I think two things maybe. One, just do anything, get it out there, and then do the next one a little better. But keep doing things. Don't be shy about, don't be worried that it's not good enough. Like, do it, and then you can always do it better next time. The other thing is that more people want to help you than you think. So if you ask advice, if you ask for help, I know of like 2 people in my entire circle who would not make the time for it. Almost everybody has been where you are, and they'll want to help you out. So take advantage of that. If somebody offers to help you, if somebody offers to look at your stuff or give you advice or read your story or whatever, let them do it. Follow up with it, because if you don't show the drive to do that, then they're not going to come, drag it out of you. But if they offer, they mean it. Take them up on it. Best universities if you're interested in concept and character design. So that's a good question. I work at LCAD, but LCAD has a phenomenal game art program. Art Center has an amazing entertainment design program. The programs are a little bit different, like the way they run and their traditions. Gosh. You also don't need to go to art school. They can be fairly expensive. And the main thing that an art school supplies that studying on your own does not is fellow students who are highly dedicated, obviously teachers who can give you advice, but also it's like the pressure and the environment to actually do the work. So if you're at Art Center, the social pressure there to perform high is huge. So it can be stressful, but you know that everybody around you is doing their best all the time. And so when your motivation is slipping, it's pretty easy to remind yourself that, like, you really need to step up if you're going to do this thing. But there are lots of ways to learn the stuff online as well. But I guess that's the thing, is mainly you just have to do the stuff. Even if you go to LCAD or Art Center or Cal Arts or something, you're going to have to do a lot of drawing. Oh, you know what? What is the name of it? Fengzhou School in China. It's like it's a boarding school for concept art, and those people are incredible. If I had it to do over again, I might do that. It didn't exist when I was going to school, but it's pretty amazing. Okay. So talking a little bit more about the broader game team. Yeah, how do we start making Guns and Dragons and things, right? Well, there's a design. So the design team, this is different than the design I was saying you needed to know. There's design for art, and then there's like game design. So game designers, you come up with the idea, you come up with the mechanics, like what's the hook of the game? How does it play? If it's a big game like Skyrim or something, if it's a role-playing game, they may have the story idea. So game design is a really broad field. There's like game designers that favor writing stories. There's game designers that, get in the nitty-gritty and script code for how characters behave in game. Because like I said, they don't do anything for free. They're not real animals or people. If you don't program them to do it, they won't do it. So there are designers who focus on that. There are designers who balance economies, right? How many experience points for this? How many experience points for a level? How do the skill trees work? How does the actual economy work? How much should things cost in game? All that kind of math and stuff. There are designers who do that. Art, obviously, concept art, 3D art, visual effects, UI art, right? Building the user interface, that's huge. And I'll tell you that UI and visual effects are both in pretty high demand. Not a lot of people just decide out of the blue to go do that, but they're really important. Sound design. So there are people who compose. There are people who do like Foley, which is kind of making up sounds to match the actions in the game, because it's not real steel when it hits. It's just pixels. And so somebody's got to make that sound. And then there are engineers, sound engineers, who do things like, code sounds to trigger so that, it changes the way it sounds when you move into a space. So it sounds like you're in a stone vault instead of in the wide open or something like that. Narrative, right? There are people who just write stories and dialogue for games. And like I said, that line gets crossed a little bit with design. Programming, lots of programming jobs. Production, you basically help everybody stay organized, and you help coordinate all those different parts of the team, help them stay on schedule. Quality assurance is huge. They are unthanked. Nobody remembers that sound exists, by the way, but it's like super important. quality assurance, everybody remembers they exist, but I'll tell you that they give them a bad time because quality assurance takes a certain mindset. Like you have to love playing games, but you have to also play a game with the intention of breaking it, which I don't want to do. But once you break it, you also have to pay really close attention to exactly how you broke it. You know, what were you doing? Where were you? You know, what were all the possible conditions that might factor the code? Um, they document all of that. And if they don't document every little thing about it, then when you go to try and fix the bug they logged, you're not sure where to go look. You could be like, well, it could be anything. I mean, I don't know where to start poking. But if 3 bugs come in and they all have, 15 conditions logged, and 2 of those conditions are the same for all of them, then it's like, yeah, it's one of those. Um, sorry, let's see. What do I prefer, Unreal or Unity? I mean, I'm a Unity user right now. I have not used Unreal. Unreal has the reputation of, and it does have some incredible rendering capabilities. So if you build an environment now in Unreal, they are claiming that you can have millions and millions of polygons and it's fine, which is absolutely not how it used to be. So that's pretty incredible. Unity is fairly user-friendly. It's not as easy as I thought it would be. There's more scripting involved, no matter what you want to do. But it's pretty user-friendly and it's very capable. But hard finding a job for this kind of work. Yeah, it is actually. There's a ton of it though. So it is possible. But there are a lot of schools, teaching it now. There are a lot of people at the top of the funnel training people to go in. So it's your competition is greater. The internet has opened things up. There are people who can make incredible digital sculptures that live in Eastern Europe or Asia, that the cost of living where they are is just much, much, much lower. So they can charge, quarter of the price that it would take you just to barely survive here. So that's tricky. Yeah, and I'll answer more of these questions in a sec. Quality assurance marketing. So if you're a business-oriented person, right? If all the people sitting in the dark making the game don't have somebody to sell it to people, they can't get paid. So marketing is really important to people who go out there and do that stuff. Analytics. If you like math and human behavior, the analytics team will look at the numbers of, how many people engaged with this, like, in Fortnite, which guns do they like, which characters do they like, which maps do they like, how are they playing, what is it that draws people, what is it that makes people stick around, obviously, what is it that makes people spend money, and then community management. If you like people, esports is huge now and it's only going to get bigger. So people to interface and keep the community non-toxic, right? Toxic fans is a real problem. Toxic players in multiplayer games is a problem. So community managers, there are people who are like professional DMs, dungeon masters on these servers who, go in and patrol the community, but also community managers will get the community excited, come up with contests, promote things. I'm going to skip over this pretty quick, but the basic plan for game development is pre-production, production, and post-production. Pre-production, you come up with the idea, you create a pitch, which is like just a little bite-sized, like it's just a bare idea of the game. Then you start doing concepts, and then if that passes, then you start making a game design document and a technical design document. These are the things we want the player to be able to do, and this is how we think we can do it. And then when you're in production, you just keep plugging away until you've got the master copy of the game, which is never perfect. It's just good enough to ship. And then post-production didn't used to be as huge, but I think almost every game now has some kind of live operations where, new downloadable content will come out. Partially because it's very profitable and partially because that's what the audience demands now. So, and every one of those disciplines is involved in all of those steps. Yeah, skills required depends on which discipline you're going into. None of these require a diploma. Nobody's going to demand your college diploma. However, proving to them that you know what you're doing without a diploma is harder. So that's where if you want to pull down Unity right now and make a game, that's your best portfolio piece you could possibly have. But short of that, saying, oh yeah, I studied programming at this place and I graduated, then they know that you know a bunch of stuff that somebody else already tested you on. Otherwise, they're going to have to test you. And, depending on how much time they have, they may or may not. Soft skills, there's a whole page of this on your ROP site. A lot of great information. Soft skills are valuable everywhere. Good communication, self-motivation, being able to stay organized and keep working yourself, and just professionalism, just being kind to each other and being able to manage conflict in a professional way. And then you guys have a lot of clubs and things like that. You can practice that. Rewards of the profession. I mean, making a fantasy that other people run through and then write letters or, post good reviews is really satisfying. I'll tell you, I'm kind of sometimes a self-hating game artist. I'm like, why am I not doing something real? Why do I not work at JPL or something like that? And then, there were people who played Dragonvale like while they were getting chemotherapy. Anyway, so you can affect, entertainment's important. So that's good. Obviously, it's a paying job. There's a lot of money in the game industry right now, so it pays pretty well. It's creative work. It beats, whatever it is you don't like doing over and over, it beats that. You get to work with a lot of really curious people. Every game is new pretty much. So everybody around you is going to be solving problems constantly, which is difficult. But if you're curious and you like to figure things out, it's a great environment for that. And yeah, there are game developers all over the world. And because we're all trying to figure things out, we're sharing information a lot. We talk a lot. So it's a good community. Challenges, right? It's a creative industry, as I said. So the downside of that is that trying to get the muse to speak to you on schedule can be very difficult. And that's why that Ian McCaig process, that's how you court the muse. That's how you push past the most obvious dumb ideas to ideas that are just like, that people recognize, but they would never think of themselves. So it's hard. It can be very profit oriented. So it can be disillusioning because you want to do something that's just awesome and fun and beautiful. And the business people are saying, yeah, but if you did this, we'd sell more. Time and budget, long hours potentially. I've done my share of crunch. Part of why I became a producer was to help people avoid that. Keeping your skills up. The technology is changing constantly. So, doing your work and having social life and keeping your skills up is tough. But most professions have that. And then, yeah, nobody understands. If you're not in games, nobody understands it. They think you just play games. Or, like I said, my mother she still thinks I'm an animator at Pixar, no matter how many times I tell her I'm not. Tips to get in. Again, foundation level stuff. Don't leap straight into the software. Understand the basics of, like, if you want to be a programmer, there's a lot of math involved, and not in an intimidating way. By the way, common core stuff, watching what my daughters do, I think you guys are having a way better time learning math in a way that's going to stick with you than my generation got. Try before you buy. So like I said, pull down the game engines and just fiddle around in there. Get some friends together and make a tiny little game. You'll learn a ton and you'll see if you really like doing it. And then when you're able, there are internships, right? So you can kind of go try out a company. You can go try out a role. Play games if you like games for research, but you have to be researching. Like, ask yourself, what makes this fun? How did they do that kind of things? Don't just have fun in there. You can do that too, but like when you're playing for research, make sure that you're actually researching. And then recognize sometimes the games that you like to play are not the ones that you'd want to make. I like playing games that look really realistic, but man, making them is tedious. Like, I don't want to remake the real world that already exists out there. I want to make something crazy and fantastic and stylized. Know your goals and know your limits. So no matter what you guys do in life, get enough sleep, get some exercise, know what your limits are. If, don't let yourself negotiate a salary that's too low. Don't, don't let people suck more of your time than you're willing to give. I will skip that. Yeah, and that's pretty much that. This presentation will be available for all of you, but here are a couple of resources. This Ian McCaig, there's him talking about the process, he says, because he's Canadian. The THUD is useful to look at if you are thinking of any technical industry. It's kind of, somebody came up with a generic like job review. So if you want to be a level 1 artist, these are the skills. If you want to be a level 2 artist, these are the skills. If you want to be a level 1 programmer, these are the skills. So if you're curious about a much more in-depth look, the THUD is a really good resource. ArtStation, if you want to be an artist, those are the people making games. So you have to measure yourself against that, or that's your goal. All right. So let's see. I think we have time for questions. Yeah.
Yeah, we have about 10 minutes for questions. Students, if you want to ask a question, you can go ahead and do so now. You can also type it in the chat. You can send it directly to me if you want to be anonymous and I can ask the question for you. We can do that as well.
All right, let's see. I see when you first brainstorm a new game, is it primarily based on real scenes? I think that depends on the game designer, like who's initiating the design, what kind of a game it is. There are some really good games based on real things. A lot of people are making games now that are trying to be more educational. There's a game about the 1979 revolution in Iran. And it's a game, but it's based on real events, and it's not made to just be fun. It's made to be kind of put you in the shoes of people who went through something crazy, so that you understand the events better. Where would I recommend someone go to high school? I mean, uni is an awesome school. My family moved here in large part so that my children could go to uni. That said, my youngest daughter is now going to OSHA because she loves the arts, and they do have some game things there. You don't need, like I said, foundation stuff. You're going to have a hard time finding a better high school for good foundation level skills than university. So that's what I would focus on in high school, is focus on your foundation. And yeah, like I said, it doesn't matter where you go to school. Nobody's looking at your diploma necessarily. That said, like for college, I will say that Art Center opens doors. People know that name. There's Sheridan College. There are a couple of colleges that if you went there, people know the kind of stuff you went through to get out of it. And so they kind of, there's a little bit of built-in respect. But really, it's only a tiny bit. Let's see. Oh, sorry. Mentioned a conversation where volunteers had lots of opportunities to network. Oh, right. The Independent Game Developers Association on this list, they throw what's called GDC, or the Game Developers Conference, every year. Sadly, we didn't have it last year. This year, I think it's kind of virtual, and they're planning on having one in the summer if they can. But that's a huge convention. There are like seminars, little classes, and lots of networking, lots of just, game developers from all over the world hanging out. A version of that convention also takes place in Germany. There's one in Asia. I want to say there's one in the Middle East now. A lot of new game development going on in Africa as well, animation and game development. I'm really excited to see more stuff that's coming out of cultures that are not like Western cultures. Yeah, it's going to be neat to see more of. You mentioned a conversation. Oh yeah, that was it. Sorry, to be more clear, companies. I don't know, actually. I'm not sure about high school internships. I can look into that. I can look into that and get back, but I'm not sure. I think once this week. Oh, a convention this week? There is a game jam this week at LCAD, and I actually can pull up the sheet to see if high school students are allowed. 4th annual game jam. All Southern California college students. All right, never mind. There are game jams. Let's see. Oops. Sorry, I gotta cancel that. Did I miss a question?
I don't see any others. Students, do you have any other questions?
I know I ripped through a lot of the other disciplines. Does anybody have any questions about any of the other parts of the game development team? Anybody want to tell me what their favorite game is now? What are y'all playing? Minecraft. Ooh, Breath of the Wild, beautiful game. Serious or applied games? Gosh. So actually, Broken Circle was working on some of those. That's a new initiative there. Let me think. Serious or applied games? I will tell you a game. This is not really an answer to that question, but the game that I feel like if anybody wants to know if games can be art, and definition of art is all over the place, but for me, like, being moved and kind of learning something about yourself or experiencing something, there's a game called Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons that if you play that game with a controller, you have to play it with a controller, is really mind-blowingly good. Um, Applied games, there was a game called Redshift a long time ago that if you knew the math, you were basically doing astronomy and flying around the solar system, but it was all based on real physics and real astronomy. Neil deGrasse Tyson did a Kickstarter some years ago that I helped. I pitched in $25 or something. That was going to be the same thing, flying around. If you saw his Cosmos show, you'd be flying around with Neil deGrasse Tyson, learning about the universe, but being in the universe with real physics. So I don't know where that is now. Yes, the cookie clicker. Yeah, there was a game called Cow Clicker. Doesn't you guys know the idle games or clicker games? It's like literally you just tap and like it counts the taps, or the taps fill something up and then you can do another one. It's a weird genre of games. But a guy made a game called Cow Clicker, and it was literally a picture of a cow, and you just clicked on it, it would tell you how many times you clicked on the cow. And people were racking up tens of thousands of clicks on these cows. And the thing is that he made the game to kind of point out how ridiculous and pointless games like that were. But instead, people were playing it. Oh, that's what it was. It was free to play stuff. So in the beginning of free to play, you do like literally 17 mouse clicks in Frontierville, and then you had to buy more clicks or wait 24 hours. It's 17 clicks. You couldn't do much with 17 clicks. And then they would sell you more for like, $10 or something for another 17 clicks. Ridiculous. So he made Cow Clicker, and he was selling more clicks, and he made so much money. He tried to shut the thing down. He felt really guilty because he was trying to basically point out how stupid it was that people spend money like that. And instead people gave him that money. So he like turned it over to charity, and then he engineered an event to like end, he called it the Cowpocalypse. But he said that he can see that people still check in on their virtual cows to see if they've come back yet. So gaming is a weird, powerful medium. um, Overwatch, Ghost of Tsushima. Yeah. Yeah. If you have an art idea, boy, there are doing things in Unity, and the sophistication, the visual sophistication of the general public now. It used to be that if you did something that looked like South Park, um, people would make fun of it and they wouldn't want to look at it. But now people see enough realistic stuff. They see highly rendered things so that, like whatever your style is, even if it's like intentionally wonky or unintentionally wonky, people are willing to give it a look for the ideas behind it. All right. Well, I want to thank all of you, for the opportunity to come out here and talk to you.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. That was an amazing presentation. I'm sure the students are very grateful for your time and all of the information that you shared with them. Students, I did put the evaluation in the chat box. Please make sure to complete that before you head out.
Is there a game club on campus, like a game development club?
Not that I know of at Woodbridge. I don't know, students at other schools, if you have one, do you want to share out?
That's right. And I will apologize if I forgot that this is not just through university. The entire IUSD is an incredible school district. So my
It's okay. You can be biased. You can have your opinion.
yeah. I mean, Newport Harbor, that's one thing. If I had known, somebody asked if I, what did I wish I had known earlier? If I had stayed at Newport Harbor and or gone to OSHA and then gone to Art Center right off the bat, I would be decades earlier in my career than I am. But then again, the road that I went on, there's a lot of stuff that I gained from that. So, but yeah, the schools around here are mighty good. All right. Well, I don't want to.
All right, well, thank you so much. Students, I'm just going to hang out for a couple more minutes to make sure that everyone has access to the link. As soon as you're done, you can head out. And Mr. Olson, thank you. Thank you again. This was great.
Well, thank you.